I'm Eric Sterner. I'm a fellow at the George C. Marshall Institute. I've had a variety of jobs in government. I was most recently the Associate Deputy Administrator for Policy and Planning in NASA. One of NASA's historical and long-term problems has always been too many things on its plate for the resources allocated to it. So you can just take things off the plate. The alternative is to fully fund the agency. One of those two ought to be preferable. I think the administration has fallen into the trap of its last few predecessors, and it's not a partisan shot. It happened to the Bush administration, happened to the Clinton administration, and it was always to put too many ambitious things in the basket that the agency just couldn't carry out for the funding that was allocated.
Let's allow the private sector to get in so that they can, for example, send these low Earth orbit vehicles into space, and we may be able to achieve a point in time where those of you who are just dying to go into space, you can buy a ticket, and a private carrier can potentially take you up there while the government focuses on the big breakthroughs that require much larger investments and involve much greater risk.
Look, the simple truth is that there is no private demand for human spaceflight. Okay, I'm probably overstating it. Some people will argue that there are tourists, and the fact that I think 6 or 7 of them have flown to the space station proves the point. They're paying prices that are vastly subsidized by governments. Okay, the people who are providing the service didn't have to recoup their investment costs. So if you look at a private market, those folks invest money, they expect to make it back plus a profit. They can't do that because there's no private demand that's significant. So the administration thinks the government can step in and stimulate that private demand. Government spending is not what stimulates the demand. What stimulates the demand is there's something of value that makes it worth sending people into space that private people can recoup the profit from. And the profit has to be more than the markup on the value of the government contract. So I think the administration is proceeding from a flawed premise.
And in order to reach the space station, we will work with a growing array of private companies competing to make getting to space easier and more affordable. Now, I recognize that some have said it is unfeasible or unwise to work with the private sector in this way. I disagree. The truth is, NASA has always relied on private industry to help design and build the vehicles that carry astronauts to space, from the Mercury capsule that carried John Glenn into orbit nearly 50 years ago, to the Space Shuttle Discovery currently orbiting overhead. By buying the services of space transportation, rather than the vehicles themselves, we can continue to ensure rigorous safety standards are met, but we will also accelerate the pace of innovations as companies, from young startups to established leaders, compete to design and build and launch new means of carrying people and materials out of our atmosphere.
Basically, it's a different source of contracting. We've taken out procurement contracts, which are the customary way of doing things. They tend to be cost plus, and they tend to be expensive because the government accepts much of the risk. And they switched to sort of service contracting and subsidizing development. Now, the administration will argue accurately that the price of development or the cost of development is essentially being subsidized by the private sector. The government wants the capability, and the private sector is investing its own money to create the capability, and that's true. The problem is that in the past, attempts to sort of merge this public-private interest and expectation of a future market have failed because they're not based on sound projections of what the market demand is going to be.